I love to share, especially when I'm encouraged. I love to encourage other people because I think we all need encouraging, and especially at this time of despair and chaos and all the things that are going on around. And firstly, I want to read the same scripture, but out of two different translations. And I'm reading out of Mark 11:22, and I'm reading first of all out of the Passion Translation. Jesus replied, "Let the faith of God be in you. Listen to the truth I speak to you. If someone says to this mountain with great faith and having no doubt, 'Mountain, be lifted up and thrown into the midst of the sea,' and believe that what he says will happen, it will be done. This is the reason I urge you to boldly believe, for whatever you ask in prayer, be convinced that you have received it and it will be yours." And then this is out of the New Living Translation. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "Have faith in God. I tell you the truth, you can say to this mountain, 'May you be lifted up and thrown into the sea,' and it will happen. But you must really believe it will happen and have no doubt in your heart. I tell you, you can pray for anything, and if you believe that you will receive it, it will be yours." And in the book of Think and Grow Rich, you look at that and think, oh, well, Think and Grow Rich. But in this book, Napoleon Hill, it took him 25 years of discovery and research to write this book, to go for the great men and women of God to find out what they done to make their lives successful. And he had a favorable break and opportunity. And it was a 25 years of determined effort that it had to be devoted before it became an asset. 25 years. And we look at that and someone says, oh, in 25 years you're going to reap this. We're looking there, wow, that's a long time. Andrew Carnegie planted an idea in his mind of organizing the principle of achievement into philosophy of success. Thousands of people have profited by his discoveries in the 25 years of his research, and several fortunes have been accumulated. It was an idea that was developed: determination, definitiveness of purpose, desire to obtain the goal, and persistent effort of 25 years to survive. He had to survive through disappointment, discouragement, temporary defeat, criticism, and the constant reminder that it was a waste of time. The people would just tell him, oh, you're wasting your time, you're wasting your time. It was a determined obsession. And why I want to read out of this is because God says, whoever so asks and believes. Now, this is a story in Napoleon Hill's book, and he did research, and it's a true story. And I want to read out of it because this says, what would I do if I had $1 million, right? And this story proves the truth of an old saying, where there is a will, there is a way. It was told by me, the beloved educator and clergyman, the late Frank W. Gonzalez, who began to preach his preaching career in the stockyards regions of South Chicago. While Dr. Gonzalez was going through college, he observed many defects in our educational system, defects which he believed he could correct if he were the head of the college. His deepest desire was to become the directing head of an educational institution in which young men and women would be taught to learn by doing. He made up his mind to organize a new college in which he would carry out his ideas without being handicapped by orthodox methods of education. He needed $1 million to put the project across. Where was he to lay his hands on a large sum of money? That was a question that absorbed most of his ambitious young preacher's thoughts. But he couldn't seem to make any progress. Every night he took the thought to bed with him. He got up in the morning. He took it with him everywhere he went. He turned it over and over in his mind until it became a consuming obsession with him. $1 million is a lot of money. He recognized the fact, but he also recognized the truth that the only limitation is that which one sets up in one's own mind. Being a philosopher as well as a preacher, Dr. Gonzalez recognized, as all who do succeed in life, that definitive of purpose is the starting point of which one must begin, backing a burning desire to translate that purpose into the material equivalent. He knew that all great truths, yet he did not know where or how he would lay his hands on $1 million. The natural procedure would have been given up and quit. So in the natural, he would have actually thought, no way, I'm going to quit. Would have been to give up and quit by saying, Ah, well, my idea is a good one, but I cannot do anything about it because I can never procure the necessary $1 million. That is exactly what the majority of people would have said, but it is not what Dr. Gonzalez said. What he said was, he did. What he said and what he did are so important that I now introduce him and let him speak for himself. So this is Napoleon Hill writing about it, and this now is Dr. Gonzalez sharing his side of the story. From Dr. Gonzalez. One Saturday afternoon, I sat in my room thinking of ways and means of raising the money to carry out my plans. For nearly 2 years, I had been thinking, but I had done nothing but think. The time had come for action. I made up my mind there and then that I would get the necessary $1 million within a week. How? I was not concerned about that. The main thing of importance was the decision to get the money within a specific time, and I want to tell you that that moment I reached the definitive decision to get the money within a specific time, a strange feeling of assurance came over me, such as I had never experienced before. Something inside of me seemed to say, why didn't you reach that decision a long time ago? The money was waiting for you all that time. Things began to happen in a hurry. I called the newspapers and announced I would preach a sermon the following morning, entitled What I Would Do If I Had $1 Million. I went to work on the sermon immediately, but I tell you, frankly, the task was not difficult because I had been preparing the sermon for almost 2 years. The spirit back of it was a part of me. Long before midnight, I had finished writing the sermon. I went to bed and slept with a feeling of confidence, for I could see myself already in possession of the $1 million. Next morning I arose early, went into the bathroom, read the sermon, then knelt on my knees and asked that my sermon might become to the attention of someone who would supply the needed money. While I was praying, I again had that feeling of assurance that the money would be forthcoming. In my excitement, I walked out without my sermon and did not discover the oversight until I was in my pulpit and about ready to begin delivering it. It was too late to go back for my notes, and what a blessing that I couldn't go back. Instead, my own subconscious mind yielded the material I needed. When I arose to begin my sermon, I closed my eyes and spoke with all my heart and my soul of my dreams. I not only talked to my audience, but I fancied I also talked to God. I told what I would do with $1 million if that amount were placed in my hands. I described the plan I had in mind for the organization of a great educational institution where young people would learn to do practical things and at the same time develop their minds. When I had finished and sat down, a man slowly rose from his seat about 3 rows from the rear and made his way towards the pulpit. I wondered what he was going to do. He came to the pulpit, extended his hand, and said, "Reverend, I liked your sermon. I believe you can do everything you said you would do if you had $1 million. And to prove it that I believe in you and your sermon, if you would come to my office tomorrow morning, I will give you that $1 million. My name is Philip D. Armour." Young Gonzalez went to Mr. Armour's office with the $1 million, and the $1 million was presented to him. With the money, he founded the Armour Institute of Technology. That is more money than the majority of preachers ever see in an entire lifetime, yet the thought impulse back of the money was created in the young preacher's mind in a fraction of a minute. The necessary $1 million came as a result of an idea. Back of the idea was a desire which young Gonzalez had been nursing in his mind for almost 2 years. Observe the important fact. He got the money within 36 hours after he reached a definite decision in his own mind to get it and decided upon a definite plan for getting it. So there we go. We have got to make a plan. Why did it happen for him? He had that in his mind for 2 years. He wanted to do. He had an idea and he wanted to do it. And when he had, and as it says here, and if I can just remind you, then Jesus said to the disciples, "Have faith in God. I tell you the truth, you can say to this mountain, you may be lifted up and be thrown into the sea, and it will happen. But you must really believe it. It will happen and you have no doubt. Believe it and it will happen. Have no doubt in your heart. I tell you, you can pray for anything, and if you believe that you receive it, it will be yours." God's word is telling us today that we must believe for what we're asking to, and we will receive it by faith. And if you read this book, it is so full of all the men and women that made it because they'd never stopped. They believed. They all started off with nothing, but they had an idea. And I've got so many I want to share just to encourage each and every one of you, just as I'm encouraging myself as I'm reading this, that nothing is impossible with God. And if we have an idea and a decision and we never give up and we have faith in God, He wants us to prosper. It's God's will for all to prosper. And maybe He's given us an idea and we're just thinking, oh, there's no way I can start that thing because I haven't got the money. God will make a way where there seems to be no way. He needs us to have faith, confidence in Him, and believe that nothing is impossible. And I just had to share that today. Have a wonderful afternoon, and I hope you're encouraged. God bless.